Welcome back. This is the next part where we will be creating a symbol to go with our new circular family. The first thing that we need to do is create a new family to nest into this family. We can do that by going to New and then Family. And as you recall, when we tried to create a new before, we went into 3D. Well, we don't want to create a 3D item, and we don't want to create an annotation because annotations size in paper space. We actually want something that'll size to scale. That is kind of like our 2x2s or 2x4s, where they fit exactly in the dimension that you type in. So that requires us to use a detail item. So I'm picking detail item as my template. Now, the next thing we'll want to do is create a line style that is consistent with what you've been using in your other symbols in your library. This is so that when people go to VG, Visibility Graphics, and try to change the line style, they do so consistently. Now, in lighting, it can be very confusing because people can type in VG and try to change the line style or its visibility by going to light fixtures, when in reality it's changed by either generic annotations or detail items. Now, it's kind of confusing that detail items is actually in model categories, which, I don't know why they did that, but it's in model categories. So how we create new subtypes is in Manage and Object Styles. So you'll see there's Model and Annotation. So here we are in Detail Items. For whatever reason, Detail Items is in model categories, even though it's a 2D type thing. So you automatically get these line styles. And we want to create a new one called Lighting Symbols or Symbol. It's very important that you're consistent with this. I have not been consistent, and we now have 4 different lighting symbols just because of whether I capitalized it, whether I put an S on the end, once I spelled symbols incorrectly. So make sure that you know how to spell symbol and that you spell the name consistently every single time so that they will group under the same one. Assign it a line weight and you're good to go. Now when we create our symbol, we will want to pick that type that we just created. So when I go to line, you'll see that I now have lighting symbol as one of my options. We're going to create a circle because we are creating a circular fixture. If you're creating a rectangular fixture, you'll want to do a rectangular draw. Again, we have the option of make this temporary dimension permanent. And we don't have a label because we haven't set up our labels in here. So we'll want to do that just like we did for the 3D. So first we will get our shared parameter for radius. It's going to be a dimension and its type. Actually, since we're nesting, we want to make everything instance. It doesn't actually matter if you pick type or instance when you're nesting. I have a rule for myself to always use instance because it just makes your life easier when you're nesting it. So I'm going to say make everything instance. We'll talk about this once we nest. Once you've set up your shared parameters, we can go ahead and select our dimension and assign it to radius. I'm going to go ahead and make our radius 5 inches for a 9-inch diameter fixture. And let's just drag this out of the way. We're keeping the dimension there, we're just putting the label over here so that it doesn't cover up our symbol. Next, we need to create the filled region for emergency. Now, this filled region needs to be slightly less than the regular symbol that we have, so that it's not touching the symbol, but it's very close. So we'll need to set up a new parameter. It does not need to be shared parameter. It just needs to be a family parameter. So we're going to call this radius EM shade. Now this is very tricky because normally we would use an annotation symbol, and our definition of the difference between the emergency shading and the radius would be a set sheet or paper space amount, say like 1/32 inch or something like that, or 3/32 inch. Probably not 3/32 inch, but you get the idea. However, since we are creating a detail item and not a generic annotation, this measurement is going to change how it looks depending on your scale. So if we create it as being 1 inch, it'll be a very, very small amount in, say, 16th scale, but it's going to be a huge amount in, say, 1/2 inch scale. So we're going to try something out and see how it looks. When you're creating your fixture, you may have to play around with this and test it into the project world to see if you like it on your normally used scale, such as 1/8 inch. So it depends on what it'll be. And again, this is real world measurements, not paper space measurements. So 1 inch on an 1/8 inch scale project is going to be 96 times smaller. So if the radius is 5 inches, we'll probably want to make, I'm guessing it like a 1/2 inch. But we can't make it a 1/2 inch there. We've got to make it equal to radius minus 1/2 inch. So you'll see that that's pretty close. Okay, you'll notice that our shaded region is actually not the right one. It's concrete block. You can do edit type, duplicate, call this gray shade. Oops. Now this is tricky. We need to make sure we pick the right gray. I'm going to pick, okay, this is 128, 128, 128, which I happen to remember is the shade. So memorize these numbers that you have for your shade. So for example, if I pick this one, there are different values. So remember to pick the same shade when you do your family so that they don't look all different. And we don't really want that filled region. We just want solid. And now you have yourself the emergency fill. You can set the boundary to be invisible lines so that it's not actually a line, it's just gray. And there we have it. We have our shaded emergency region. To make this so that it's not always on, we'll want to hook it up by unchecking visible so that visible is not the default, and associate family parameter, and check emergency. Next, we're going to want to copy this. You can also use offset. We'll want to type in 1 inch or maybe 2 inches. We'll see how that looks. And that's going to be our recessed line. I think actually that 1 inch is going to look better. I know we had 2 inches on the other family, but that just seems like a lot. So there we go. Now we have our recessed one. We're going to click on that, uncheck visible, and associate family parameter with recessed. And there we go. We have our symbol. So let's save this. We haven't done any saving yet. And go ahead and name it what you think makes sense. I like to keep a special folder for symbols that I nest into families so that they're not the families that we necessarily use on a day-to-day basis. They're just what's nested. So this symbol is being nested. And you'll notice that I have a naming convention. I put annote if it's a generic annotation, which is most of our stuff. We very rarely use detail items. You only use them for content that is going to shrink or grow to scale. So when you type in 4 feet, it actually shows up as 4 feet. And we will name this like the other ones. Now that we have created this symbol, we can go ahead and load it into our 3D family. Okay, so now we have our symbol and our 3D family. So I'm going to load this symbol into project, which is not really into a project. It's into our 3D family, which is called family 3 right now because we haven't saved it. Shame on me. Save your families. And there it is. So click on it and hook up your families. So what I was saying before about whenever you're nesting, making them always instance, that's just so that you can hook them up here in the properties bar. Otherwise, you have to go to edit type and hook them up here. Don't really want to do that. So recessed, uncheck, always uncheck first so it's by default off. Then, unless you want it by default on, which I don't, and hook them up to the corresponding parameter. Ta-da, we did it. So now that I see this in half scale, this is really big gap. I don't really like how big that gap is. Let's check 1/8 scale because that's what we do most of our projects in. So that's much better. That's much more realistic, but I'm still thinking that this might be a bit much. You can go back and edit that by, changing your, actually, this is not, so this is a mistake on my part. Let's try this out a bit. If we change the radius to say 6 inches, this would be a 12-inch fixture, 12-inch diameter fixture. Oh no, our radius went away, so that's a problem. We never created a parameter to control the recessed radius. So just like we did radius EM shade, whoops, I spelled that wrong. Just like we created radius EM shade, we need to create radius recessed. Now, in our rectangular fixture, we could do this by simply just creating a dimension and locking it, but I'm going to do it this way because it's round and that seems complicated to do that on a radius. If you don't know what I'm talking about, no worries, just follow what we're doing now, just like we did with EM shade. And we're just going to say equals radius plus, I'm going to do 3/4 of an inch because it just seemed really big when we did it before. Now you can change this based on your preferences once you try it out. See how it goes. I realized my mistake, guys. This hasn't been set up with that parameter. We created it, but we didn't hook it up. So let's create this dimension. This is for the recessed one. And instead of a static 6 inches, we've got to actually assign this dimension to something. All that work did nothing. So we're going to do radius recessed. And that's why it wasn't doing anything before, because it wasn't actually hooked up. And I'm going to go back to 1 inch. Harry was trying all these different things. And now it should work. Ta-da! It does. And that looks pretty good. This is 1/2 inch though. Let's check it out in 1/8 inch. That's also pretty tight. So I might go back and change this a little bit more, but we don't need to do that in the video. So we're going to press pause, and the magic of video editing, you'll be instant. Okay, so I've edited it to be 1 inch and 2 inches between the shaded and the fixture, and between the fixture and the recessed. So now that looks a lot better in 1/8 inch scale. And we can try changing it by typing in various different radiuses. So this would be like an 8 inch fixture, and this would be like, say we want a 16 inch fixture, so that would be 8 inch radius. So that looks pretty good. Be very careful with this fixture because it's easy to create a lot of different sizes, and it may look really bad. I try to make our families so that they can't look bad, that they're automatically set up. So for example, if someone types in 1 inch, that is not a good idea. Oops, not fixture depth. It can't make that type because we have the shading region. So let's try 2 inches. That looks terrible. It looks like a target. So I would recommend you can set it up with formulas so that it can't get smaller than a certain amount. But I'm just going to leave it and hope that people who type in 2 inches realize that they're doing something ridiculous and to use downlight for something. I mean, we don't usually use round fixtures are never smaller than a downlight. If you're doing something that's 6 inches or smaller, it's going to be a downlight, which is a different fixture. So we're just gonna assume it's at least 6 inches in diameter, and maybe 8 inches in diameter. So we'll put 4 as the default, and that should be the smallest it goes. Alrighty, we now have our 3D family with a 2D family that's nested in it, and I haven't saved yet, so go ahead and save. I'm naming mine with space free at the end. You'll notice we use FB and free on our fixture names to let the user know that this is not a hosted fixture. You may notice that we have had magic boxes. Magic box tends to be a catch-all phrase for things that don't have a specific type. And so we only use the word magic box or magic cylinder if it's like really catch-all. For example, our magic cylinder is, a bollard and a pedestrian pole and a wall-mounted fixture and a landscape fixture. It's like a catch-all. So don't use the word magic in it unless it really is truly a catch-all. This isn't a catch-all. This is a very specific type of fixture. It's a round, say, ceiling-mounted fixture, maybe pendant, although I wouldn't want to make this one a pendant fixture because we don't have the pendant string, and we also don't have the dot in the center. That means it's got a pendant. So this is really only a round fixture surface. And the reason I didn't put surface in the name is because we did create recessed annotation there, or recessed lines there in the symbol. But you have to make sure you put it at an offset so that it actually is recessed into the ceiling. And that's a little bit tricky because usually recessed is face-based. So I'm going to call this round fixture and let that be it. All right, we have gone over everything to make this fixture. We have looked at the loading the shared parameters, setting up the electrical connector, creating the 3D shape, creating the symbol, and then nesting it using a detail item, not a generic annotation. So we can now test our family by typing in different sizes. So we go from 3 inches or 2 inches to say 8 inches and hit apply, and you'll see these changed. And the radius 8 inches, and you got yourself a nice dome or drum fixture. And lastly, we did not set up EM tag. So EM tag has to be an if statement. So you have if, and then emergency, then EM. If not, then nothing. What this says is if the parameter emergency, meaning if it's checked, then type, this EM tag is going to fill out with the letters EM, and if it's not checked, then double quotes is just nothing. So right now it's not checked, but if we check this, you'll see in gray the value down here is EM, and that just fills our tag out. This formula allows us to make this fixture work with our tags that we use. All right, and we're all set. Thanks for watching.